Welcome back to The Road Chose Me. On today's episode, we're going to talk about a topic that I know lots of people worry about and lots of people stress about. Is this going to make the trip not worth going? And this is dealing with extortion, corruption, and bribery when you're traveling in the developing and the undeveloped world. So this is all about dealing with guys on the side of the road who are trying to get money from you. You know, how dangerous is it? How stressful is it? I'm going to go over how do you spot it? How do you minimize it? What are some good techniques that you should practice? What are some things that you shouldn't do in those scenarios? All of that is coming up on today's episode. So if that's something you've always stressed about, stick around, we're going to get right to it. So let's dive right into it. What am I even talking about when I say extortion or bribery or corruption? And what I mean is, when you're traveling in undeveloped or developing countries, is dealing with officials who try to get money out of you illegally. In kind of the most common scenario, it'll be the military or the police who come up with some reason why you should give them money. And because, I mean, these guys have guns often, and so a lot of people think that this is really intimidating or really scary. So these are the kinds of scenarios that I'm talking about. And right off the bat, I want to put it out there, bribery is nothing like the Hollywood version that you've seen. If you've seen it in movies or you've heard fourth-hand accounts of how this happens, you have no concept of what it actually looks like in real life. So what does it actually look like? Well, it turns out I caught it on camera when I was in Nigeria, and I have a video and I'm going to send you a way to watch it for homework. Before you go, if you've seen the video before, feel free to skip ahead to about 6 minutes. If you haven't seen the video before, watch the whole thing start to finish. It'll give you a really good idea of what these military roadblocks look like when you're traveling around the world. So for me, this is absolutely how 99.9% of all extortion attempts went down all through Latin America and all around Africa. What I want you to do while you're watching this video, especially from the 6-minute mark on, have a look at the body language. Have a look at how intimidating the officer is. Does he look like he's going to hurt me? Does he look like he's going to throw me in jail at any moment? I'll let you judge that. While you're there, keep your eyes on what I'm doing. How am I treating the officer? How am I speaking? All of these things play a really big part in the outcome of any extortion attempt and whether or not you're going to wind up handing over money or not. So I'll throw the link up here in the top left-hand corner. Go and watch that video now. I'll wait here. When you're finished, you can come back and keep watching. So hopefully you can see from that, I was not scared at all. Bribery is not something to be afraid of. Nobody is ever going to stick a gun in your face and say, give me money or else. That is simply not how this works. What we have to remember is that these guys on the side of the road, whether they're police, they're the military, they're guys manning a bridge or a border, this is their job. This is how they put food on the table. This is how they feed their family. If they were putting a gun in the face of tourists, they would be in so much trouble, they would lose their job and go to jail on the very first day. So they are never ever going to do that. That is just not how bribery goes. As you could see in the example I just showed you, more often than not, police just come up with a reason why you need to give money. And then at that point, it's kind of like a social engineering game, whether or not you actually give them money or whether you manage to talk your way out of it like I did on that video. And people always ask, you know, how common is this kind of scenario? And I don't want to terrify you and say that it's going to happen every single day for your entire trip once you hit Africa or once you hit Mexico. But realistically speaking, this is something you're probably going to deal with once a week or once every few weeks. I think it depends a lot on how you look, your attitude, and just the political climate in the countries during your particular trip. And some countries, it's never going to happen at all, like Argentina and Chile. They're really developed and the police, you know, this kind of thing was stamped out long ago. Whereas in countries that are less developed, Nigeria, the Congo, this kind of stuff happens regularly. So it will vary a lot based on what country you're in. But certainly don't be terrified that this is going to happen every 5 minutes. It's not like that at all. And I know there's a lot of advice out there that you should just keep a huge big stack of $20 bills, and whenever anyone pressures you, just hand over $20. This is absolutely the wrong thing to do for a whole bunch of reasons. The first reason is you're just encouraging these guys on the side of the road to basically be bullies and to try and get money out of foreigners who are passing through. That's just not the thing that we want to encourage. If you do that, you're just going to make it tougher for everyone who comes after you. All those other overlanders that are driving the same route as you, these border guys and these military guys, they're going to be way more determined next time to get money because you gave money. Whereas if we all stick together and we don't hand over money, it's going to be much easier for everyone and we'll all have a much smoother trip. Not only will you be teaching these guys that they can get money out of foreigners, but your trip is going to get a lot more expensive if you're forking over $20 every time someone asks for it. As well as that, you're going to make it worse for yourself each time you pay. I've had quite a few scenarios where when I arrive at a border or at a military checkpoint, it's quite obvious that the previous guys have called ahead and they've been expecting me. If I had paid a $20 or $100 bribe at the previous checkpoint, it's pretty much guaranteed that these guys are going to be expecting the same or possibly even more. So at some point, you're going to start handing over $20 or $100 regular occurrence, and at each checkpoint, they're going to be more insistent than they were at the last checkpoint. Whereas if you have an approach of just not paying, word won't spread that you're willing to pay, and then these guys won't pressure you nearly as hard to try and get money out of you. And so certainly you don't need to hand over money. In fact, I know many overlanders that have driven entire continents or around the entire world without ever paying a single cent. Most of us keep it as a real point of pride that we refuse to pay money in these scenarios. And, to lay it out on the table, when I drove from Alaska to Argentina, I did pay a legitimate bribe when I was in Nicaragua. I gave $5 to get out of a speeding ticket. And in all of Africa, I paid once when I was in the Ivory Coast. And it's a really long story and I'm not proud of it and I wish I didn't pay, but at the time I just couldn't think of a way to get out of it. Don't go into your trip assuming that you're going to pay out bribes at every opportunity. Get that out of your mind. That's the wrong approach. Come into it from the other direction. You're not going to pay bribes and you'll have a much smoother and more enjoyable trip. So how do you even spot extortion or a possible bribery attempt? Well, it turns out it's often really subtle and sometimes you won't even know it's happening. Sometimes when you're just crossing a bridge, someone will say, oh yeah, it costs $10. And if you're not on your game, you might just hand over $10 without even thinking about it. Well, that was probably extortion. Other times, officers on the side of the road, they might kind of have a look around your vehicle and see all your shiny things, see your GPS, see whatever else you've got inside, and then they'll say, my friend, what gift did you bring for me? And again, you might not realize it, but if you give them something, they've just extorted you and you've given them a bribe. And then finally, and for me, what has been the most common way that it happens is when the police or military stop you on the road and they invent some reason why you're supposed to pay them money. Sometimes they'll say you were speeding, they'll say there's some problem with your vehicle or your paperwork, and they basically just say, okay, that is a fine, you must give us $100. And they say it just like that, then they stand there with their hand out. They're not pointing their gun at you, and they didn't say or else, but they're most definitely asking you to give them money. And if you give it to them willingly, then you've just paid them a bribe. So now that we've identified what I mean when I talk about extortion or corruption, I'm sure you're wondering, how do I get out of paying? What does that actually look like? There's one thing above all else that you have to do, and I'm just going to say it this once, but assume that I mean it for everything else that I'm saying, and that is, above all, you have to stay polite, you have to stay friendly, and you have to stay calm. So no matter what the officer says to you, the best thing you can do is keep a smile on your face. Say yes sir, say no sir, reach out and shake the officer's hands. All of these things really help. Another really good one is make sure you always take off your sunglasses. It's actually quite rude to have your face blocked like this in many countries. So take off your sunglasses and be the first to say, hello sir, how are you? It's nice to meet you. Even say it in English, That's perfectly okay. If you're in Latin America or Africa, anywhere in the world, being friendly is universal. Smiling and shaking hands is universal. And in fact, in many parts of Africa, if they refuse to shake hands with you, they are disrespecting you. And so immediately now you have the moral high ground and they're going to be less likely to try to bribe you. I know it sounds strange, these guys with guns, that you actually need to be friendly to them when they're trying to take money out of your hands, but it actually really helps and it will change your interactions completely if you're friendly and polite to them. That same advice, I'm going to extend it and say, have lots of patience. A lot of these guys, I think they assume that foreigners have really limited time and we're always in a rush and we don't want to wait for things. So often I've always felt when they start inspecting my car or when they tell me to wait at a border because someone's away on lunch, I really get the feeling that if I just slipped them $20, the whole process would go really fast. But again, I'm quite stubborn about this and I refuse to pay. So when they start taking a long time to do something, I just say, oh, no problem at all. I grab a cold drink, maybe I grab a banana out of the Jeep, and I just sit in the shade and wait. Oftentimes, once I demonstrate to them that I'm willing to wait and that I'm not impatient in the least, they actually get quite confused and they're like, who is this crazy guy? I'll just get him out of here. And 99% of the time, they'll get me out of there in less than a minute. Whereas I think if I had been impatient and stamped my feet, they would have intentionally wasted my time and really drawn it out. I think sometimes they like to see how irate the foreigner can get, and sometimes they're just bored standing on the side of the road. They're looking for entertainment. Be polite, be kind, be patient. So that's your overall demeanor covered. And then the next thing that you can do whenever anyone asks you for money for any reason, I remain polite. I say, okay, no problem. And then I say, can I please have a receipt? And saying this in English is perfectly fine. If you know it in the local language, you could just say the word for receipt. And again, be friendly. This isn't a demand. You're not being rude or you're not accusing them of anything. You're just saying, oh, sir, I need a receipt for that, please. And how they react to that request is going to give you a really good indication about if this is bribery or not. So, for example, when you're leaving Belize, you have to pay an exit tax. And it really is legal and official and like a government thing. And right away, they're going to issue you an extremely formal receipt. It has like a little hologram on it. It's stamped multiple times. I think it's even signed by a couple of different people. Right away, their willingness to give you that receipt tells you a lot about how legit and how official this is. On the other hand, some countries, when they tell you you have to pay, if you say, oh, can I please have a receipt? Immediately you can see their body language change, you can see their demeanor change, and immediately they'll start coming up with every excuse under the sun why you can't have a receipt. They're going to tell you that the printer is out of ink, they're going to tell you the computer's broken, they're going to tell you they don't have a pen, they're going to tell you that in their country they don't have to issue receipts. They're basically going to come up with every excuse in the world why there's no receipt. And let's be really blunt, why are they not willing to give you a receipt? It's because they want to put the money in their back pocket and they don't want anyone to know that this ever happened. So right there and then, if they can't give you a receipt, you know that you're dealing with an extortion scenario and they're looking to steal your money. And I think too, they now know that you know, and that changes the interaction. Because remember here, these guys, they're the ones breaking the law. They're the ones doing something illegal. And they know they will get in a lot of trouble if it comes to light that they're trying to extort tourists out of money. So a lot of them are quite coy about it. They're shy. They just try and, they try it on for luck and they just say, hey, let's ask this guy for $10. And if he gives it to us, then we've got beer money tonight. If you push back even that tiny amount and say, can I please have a receipt? Probably in 50 or 75% of scenarios where it's happened to me, as soon as I say those words, the officer says, oh, it's okay, don't worry about it, you can go. Just like that. They don't want any trouble. They don't want you stirring up problems for them. So as soon as you ask for a receipt, they're pretty happy for you to leave and they don't want to deal with you anymore. Ask for a receipt, stay polite, stay friendly, and that's going to get you out a lot of extortion. Along with asking for a receipt, If it's a police scenario where they told you that you're speeding or they told you that you have some sort of infraction, I always ask them to actually write me a ticket. And again, they don't want to write you a ticket because if they do that, then they probably at the end of the day, they have to give the money and the ticket, into their office and it gets booked in as official money. Whereas if they never write a ticket, that money was never collected, which means it's in their back pocket and they get to buy beer tonight. So I've had it quite a few times. I remember clearly in Peru where one officer was holding the ticket book and he had his pen and his two buddies were saying, oh, you really don't want him to write a ticket. You don't want that. What he really meant was, just hurry up and give us 20 bucks and we'll leave you alone. And I called their bluff. I said, that's no problem. Write me a ticket. I understand I was speeding and then I'll go to the bank and I'll pay the ticket. And that's the other really big one to get out of bribery. In many, many countries in the world, they're trying to stamp out corruption and they know it's a big problem. So in fact, when you get a ticket for speeding or when you have to pay some sort of fee to the government, you never pay it just to the guy on the side of the road or to the actual official you're dealing with. 99% of the time, they're supposed to write you out a ticket, which you then take to the bank. And in the bank, you end up getting like 5 copies and 5 signatures and 5 stamps, even if you're just paying a $5 ticket. That way, the money is legally deposited in the correct bank account and none of the people involved along the way ever got to actually hold the money, which means there's less chance they can just put it in their pocket. So ask for a receipt, and if it's official police business, ask for a ticket and then make it clear that you're going to go and pay that ticket at the bank. Again, that's going to put them on the back foot and they're going to be like, oh, so this guy's cooperating with us. He's not being rude, he's not yelling, he's being very polite, but he's making our lives kind of difficult. And although he's willing to pay at the bank, he's law-abiding, it doesn't help us because we don't get any money in our pocket for beer tonight. So these officers, they're going to be, every step along the way, they're going to be less inclined to kind of go through the official stuff. And at some point they're like, this guy's never going to give us money. So they're going to wave you through. Asking for a ticket is a really good way to sort of call their bluff, but also to really deter them from persevering, trying to get money out of you. I know a lot of people worry about traveling in Latin America or Africa. They worry about the language barrier. And to be honest, extortion is one of those times where the language barrier can really work to your advantage. So my advice is try not to speak the local language, even if you know how. So let's just use the example of Mexico because it's an easy example. Let's say you're down there for a few weeks and you get pulled over and some policeman is trying to tell you that you were speeding and you have to give $100. Even if you understand him perfectly in Spanish and even if you can reply in Spanish, I usually don't. I hold back a little bit. I might use the odd word here and there to be polite. I might say, hola, ¿cómo está? But intentionally use a bit of a bad accent and then just sit back and wait. Because at this point, now the onus is on him to explain to you why you have to give him money. And if you just pretend not to understand, if you're very friendly, very polite, smile, nod your head, oh yes sir, okay sir, oh I don't understand sir, he can't really bribe money from you if you don't even understand that he wants money. So my advice is always to hold back on the local language. It's okay to be polite, you can be friendly and say hello, but if they go into some big explanation and they're using their language, just apologize. You can even apologize in their language. You can say, oh, lo siento, no Spanish, sorry. I mean, how are they going to get money out of you if they can't even communicate with you? So actually the language barrier can really work to your advantage in this scenario. Don't be afraid to use it. This is such a huge topic. I'm actually writing a book about exactly this. I've been writing it since I was in Rwanda, so obviously it's not very close to finished. And that's why I decided to put this in video format instead. I can't talk about everything all in one video, and the next video that's going to be out on Thursday will go into more details about how you can deflect bribery and some of the things you can do before you even leave home to prepare so that you're less likely to have to pay or to really get cornered by these guys trying to get money out of you. In the meantime, if this was helpful information, please hit that thumbs up button and leave a comment below what you would like me to add in the next video. What about corruption and extortion has you worried, and what do you want to know about? While you're there, make sure you hit the subscribe button as well. That way you won't miss out on future videos. So, coming up on Thursday, more on this same topic about how you can avoid extortion and paying bribes as you drive around the world.